In this video, we're going to show you how to reassemble the rear fork. Okay, now we're going to put the rear forks back on. So first thing we need to do is get the belt in the right position in the fork. So we're just going to lift the fork up, put the belt in there. That gets it in the right spot. Then we're going to come back up here, and we're going to put the shock absorber on both sides to hold the rear end of this fork up before we do anything with it. We're not going to tighten it. We're just going to get the bolts on so that they'll hold it up there on both sides. Okay, then we're going to coat the pivot shaft with some anti-seize stick. Okay, now here's where it's going to get a little tricky. What I did is I put another floor jack under here so I can lift the transmission up and down, because this portion of the transmission is also part of the rear motor mount. And your pivot shaft for your fork goes through this, but it's got to go through this, and it's got to hit into the bushing on the right side. So once you pull that out, your transmission drops. So you've got to have a way to lift that up. So obviously you're lifting the weight of the rear of the engine. So that's why I put the jack under there. So I'm going to lift it up until it looks kind of visual to where the center of the engine mount on the transmission lines up with the center of that hole before I start trying to manhandle this fork into place. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just pump my jack. You see the engine lifting up. That looks pretty close. Okay, first thing we need to do before we start lifting this fork into position is we need to take the spacer, and it goes right in there like that. And we're only going to put this side in for right now. And then we're going to lift this fork up, and we're going to get it into position to push the pivot shaft through. Okay, now with that spacer in place, we're going to lift this up, and we're going to get it into the approximate position it needs to be. There it is. Okay. It'll sit on top of the transmission. You're going to take your pivot shaft. You're going to push it through the right side first. You're going to work this fork so that it'll go all the way through. Now you probably have to get some help, because you're going to have to guide the other side through the spacer in through that rubber bushing while somebody pushes. All right, go ahead and push. There it is. Good job. That was it. It's in. Okay, now we're going to take the middle spacer. We're going to put it all the way in there. Okay, then we're going to take the left rubber mount, and there's a notch there, an indicator. That is going to go between the 11 and 12 o'clock position. So if that's 12, that's about the 11 o'clock position. And then we're going to take our outer spacer, and we're going to put it in there too. Okay, then we're going to put our fork bracket on, and this little tab will go in the notch of that rubber mount. So for now, we're just going to sit it on there, turn that mount to about the 11 o'clock position. You're going to take your bolts, and you're going to put one drop of blue on there, on both of them. 2 drops actually is what it says. Okay, then we're going to work those in. Okay, we're going to final torque it, according to your service manual. Mine's 55 to 65 pounds, foot-pounds. There we go. Okay, now we're going to put the pivot shaft screws in, 2 drops of blue Loctite, 243. Just going to hand tighten them a little bit for now, and then we'll get both sides in. We're just going to tighten those down a little bit right now before we'll get a torque wrench on it. Okay, so on the right side, I got the pivot shaft screw in there. What happens is, as you turn this, the other side might turn, especially since you got the anti-seize lubricant in there. So you're going to have to get on both sides with your wrench and hold it until you get both sides snug down so that you can get a torque wrench on them. There it goes. And you're going to do that on both sides. Okay, now what we're going to do is take the lower shock absorbers off again, and we're just going to check for movement to make sure that it moves. And we're going to check for a wiggle as well, and it does not wiggle. That thing is secure. So at this point, we can take a couple drops of blue Loctite, and we're going to put the shock absorbers back on and final tighten them by torquing them to specifications. Do that to both sides. After you get those torqued, put your caps on both sides. Okay, then we're going to put our debris deflector back on. Remember, there's a larger notched one for the bolt that's already in there. And all we got to do is put the two other bolts that are left to hold it. Okay, then we're going to put our passenger peg back on. Okay, then don't forget to put your brake line back into this clamp. That concludes the series on how to replace a drive belt on your Harley. This was the rear fork reassembly back onto the bike. The last thing you'll have to do is reinstall the rear wheel and of course adjust the drive belt deflection, and you can refer to my wheel installation and removal video for that portion of it. So I hope this helps. It will save you a whole bunch of money on this. Also be sure to check out Get Lowered Cycles at getlowered.com for parts and accessories and riding gear. They've got some great deals and will ship for free directly to your house. And be sure and hit the subscribe button for more great videos, and visit my website at rideitwrenchit.com.